Today's daf, today's daf is daf Vav, and we're up to Rava's kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan identified Rekes as Sipori. Omar Rava, mi iko leman di Omar. Is there anyone who actually holds that Rakas is Tveria? Rakas lav Tveria. Vaha ki shochiv inish hacha. When somebody dies in Bavel, Hasam, there in Tveria, Saftile Hachi. This is the hesped that they offer for someone who died in Bavel. Gadol hu b'sheshach, which means in Bavel, v'shem lo barakas. And Yotzalo Shem Tov, he has a good name even here in Rakas. And that means here in Eretz Yisrael. So he died in Bavel, but he has a very good reputation here in Eretz Yisrael. And when they take the Aron of the deceased from Bavel up to Tveria to bury him in Bavel, in Tveria, Safti Lehachi. This is the language of the Saftanim, who are in charge of giving the eulogies. They cry out in the marketplaces, so that people would come and join the escort of the deceased and bury the deceased. Oave, meaning Oave Yisrael, who are called Sridim. Now, the word Sridim, Rashi points out, Oave means Sridim, the Yavits, who lived about 5 centuries ago. He says that there's a pasuk in Yoel, Ubesridim asher Hashem kore. And the Aruch writes that Oave Sridim Yoshvei Rakas. It means Oave Talmidei Chachamim Yoshvei Beis HaMedrash Shel Tveria. Yoshvei Rakas. Tzu'u v'kablu harugei omek. Please come out and receive the mess from Bavel. Bavel is called Omek because it's deep in its typology. And so too Rabbi Zera, who was born in Bavel and went on Aliyat Eretz Yisrael, and he died in Tveria, Hinoch nafshei de Rabbi Zera, when Rabbi Zera died, Pasach alei hahusaf dana, that eulogizer opened up his hesped with the words Eretz Shinar, which is a reference to Bavel, Hara v'yolda. It, so to speak, was pregnant and gave birth to Rabbi Zera. But Eretz Tzvi, Eretz Yisrael, Gidla es shashu'eha shel Bavel. And it means Shashu'el shel Bavel, one of the beautiful products of Bavel, was raised, meaning Rabbi Zera was raised in Eretz Yisrael. Oila, oina la, amra rakas, ibda kli chemdasa. Woe is it to the city of Rakas that has lost its beautiful vessel. From the fact that the maspidim in their hesped in public, in Tveria, they call Tveria Rakas, we should derive this conclusion that it's public knowledge that Rakas is Tveria. How could Rabbi Yochanan, on the other hand, identify Rakas as Tzipori? So the Gemara now brings the opinion of Rava in the interpretation of the cities that were mentioned in the pasuk, and a number of different opinions as to why the various names of Tveria were chosen. Ella, Omar Rava, Hamas, going back to our pasuk in Yoshua, Zu, Grar. And it's called Hamas, Al Shem Chame Grar Sheba, those springs that come from Grar, that are identified with Grar. Rakas zu Tveria, Kineres zo Ginosar, The Lama Nikrit Shema Rakas. Why is Tveria called Rakas? Shafilu Reikanim Sheba. Even the ignorant that live in Tveria are Maleim mitzvos Karibim Rimon, are as full of mitzvos as the seeds of a pomegranate. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar, Rakas Shema, the name of the city is really Rakas. We call it Tveria. You don't have to find any sort of an allusion why it's called Rakas. But Lama Nikra Shema Tveria, you should ask yourself the opposite question. Why is it called Tveria? And the answer is Yosheves B'Tabura Shal Eretz Yisrael. It is located in the middle of Eretz Yisrael, like the tabor, which is the belly button in the middle of the group. Rabba Amar Rakas Shema, its original name was Rakas, and that's what we saw according to Rabbi Yirmiyah. V'lama Nikra Shema Tveria, why is it called Tveria? Chetova Re'iyasa. In other words, it causes benefit to man who look at it, and that's because there are ginos and pardesim in Tveria. Omar Zeira, Kitron, again, another name of a city, and Zu Tzipori. That's another name for the city of Tzipori. V'lo nikra shema Tzipori. If the original name was Kitron, why did they change it to Tzipori? Sheosheves b'rosh hahar k'tzibor, that it is situated on top of a mountain like a bird perched from the top of a high place. The Gemara says, is it possible to say at Kitron Tzipori? For Kitron b'chelik shel Zvulun avi, I'll prove that to you from Shoftim. Tichsiv Zvulun lo horish es yoshvei Kitron ves yoshvei nahalol. So we see that Kitron is located in the area of Zvulun when Klal Yisrael entered into the land, and the Shevet Zvulun did not reject or evict the Yoshvei Ha'arim Kitron V'Nalul, which were located in their Chelek. Then it was incumbent upon Zvulun to fulfill the mitzvah that Klal Yisrael were obligated in with regard to all the inhabitants of the land of the seven nations. Lo tzachayek al neshama. And Zvulun is being accused here of violating that tzivui and allowing these members of the nations to remain living in the land and just simply to impose upon them taxes. Now, Tzipori was certainly not located in the chelik of Zvulun, because Zvulun Misraim al midosav hava. He was a person who complained about his mazel that was measured out to him from Shamayim. He didn't want that chelik of Eretz Yisrael that he won in the lottery, in the Gorah. Shenemar, we see in Shoftim, in the Shiras Dvora, when she defeated the enemies in the battle against Sisro, Zvulun am cheref nafsho lamus. In other words, the rest of the pasuk refers to Naftali al Merome Sada. And we're going to say the following. Matam, why is it that Zvulun was Moser Atzvul Misa b'Mulchama, Cheref Nafshal Amus? Mishum de Naftali al Merome Sada. Because Zvulun saw the segment of Eretz Yisrael that was earmarked, that was designated for Naftali, and it was a place full of Merome Sada, of Sados, and as a result, Zvulun is Kanebo. He was overwhelmed by a sense of jealousy. Why is it that Naphtali gets these beautiful lands? And that was his taromes. Omar Zvulun lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ribono Shel Olam li'achar shenasati lahem Sados ukramim. You divvy out the land in a way that the Shevet Naphtali would be Zoch and the Goro, and they require possession over Sodos and Krumim. Krumim, of course, are vineyards. Velina Sata Harim Ugvos. But what did I end up with in this lottery? I got mountains and hilltops. Lachai Nosatolem Arotos. In other words, the other Shvatim got lands which were dry lands. Velina Sata Yamim Unaharos. And what you designated for me were the seas and the rivers. Amalo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds to the Taromes of Zvulun, Kulon Tzrichen Lecha. You should know that all your brothers will be dependent upon you. Why? Al Yidei Chilazon. Shenemar Amim Har Yikro Kishefa Yamim Yinoku Usfune Tmune Chol. Meaning that all the Shvatim would gather together at the mountains of Zvulun in order to purchase from him that which is Shfune Tmune Chol. So the Gemara says, "Belina Amalo Kulam Tzrichim L'Chal Yidei Chilazon." The Chilazon, which will rise up from the sea up to the mountains in the Chelik of Zvulun, is something that all of Klal Yisrael will need, because with the blood of the Chilazon, they were able to dye the Tcheles, which is part of the mitzvah's tzitzis. And it's going to be sold at a very high price, premium price. And therefore, you should not be complaining about your chelik. Tani, now we have a brisa of Rav Yosef that was taught to us by Rav Yosef, which is going to explain Tfune Chol. Tfune Zechi Lazon. This is the language of Safun. Even though, again, the word Safun is with a samach, and Sfune is with a sin, but those are interchangeable letters. And Safun is a lashon of chashivus, and a chilazon is considered davar chashiv, something very significant. Tmune zo tris, which is a kind of large fish. Chol zo schuchis levana, white glass that's made out of sand. And again, there's plenty of sand in the Chelik of Binyamin. I'm sorry, the Chelik of Zvulun, I meant to say. So with that sand, they were able to manufacture glass bricks. Schuchis levana. Levana. Shichashuva v'yikara yotze mishar schuchis. Very expensive glass. Omar lefana. Zvulun responds to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Shalom. Mimo di'eni. Who is going to notify me? Al netilas dvarim elu michelki loses li damit. You know, usually you have something that you preserve in a very safe place. You know, you lock it up, and it's yours, and nobody could have access to it. So, if you want to sell something, like in this case, you want to sell chilazon, this is not omei b'makom shomer. You can't expect me to lock it up. I mean, anyone could come along from any shevet and get access to it and take it without paying damim. Omalo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds to Zvulun's argument, Abim har yikro sham yizbechu zivchei tzedek, which means Hishva koseves netilas hasfune tmune chol minachosel shel Zvulun lakravas karbonos. Shem shasalavi carbon gazul kach lo yigzelu mizvulun. So that's part of the bracha, that nothing would be stolen from Zvulun. And now Hashem says, Simon ze yehe lecha Anyone who takes away from you chilazon or chol b'shava pruta below damim, eno moel b'frakmaktya shelo klum. It means shetiskalkel at svia midam achilazon. V'chein yiskalkel achol v'lo yoel klum. As long as it's in the possession of Zvulun, it's his, he will be able to be blessed by them. But if somebody else steals them and it's not his, then he won't be able to get any benefit whatsoever. No dam chilazon, no schuchis carrier. The isal kedaita shekitron zo tzipori. In other words, Kitron, if you think it's the city of Tzipori, Amai Misraim, why is Zvulun bertering? Why is he Misraim? Why is he complaining al Midosov on the Midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he didn't get Sadus Ukramim? V'avi Tzipori milsa datifa tuva. Tzipori is a high quality place. And it certainly supersedes in its significance Sados Ukramim. So the Gemara suggests an answer to this question. Why is it that V'chitema, you should give the answer to Leslie, that there's nothing in the land of Bracha Yuchedes Shenis Baruch Hu Eretz Yisrael other than Eretz Zavas Chol V'Dvash. And the goats will eat the ta'anim, and from the ta'anim there'll be diva, there'll be oozing of dvash, and zav, chalav meizit, there'll be goat's milk that flows from the udders of the izim. And the izim, of course, eat figs. Bizav dvash me'ata'enim, you have honey that is flowing, oozing out of the figs. Bizav chalav me'ata'izim, benasim kamin nachal. V'omar Reish Lakish l'didi chazili, I saw a place that had this bracha of zavas chalav dvash, and what place was it? The Tzipori. It was none other than Tzipori. The Avi was so large, Shisha Asar Mil, Al Shisha Asar Mil, 16 square mil, which is 4 parcels, on 4 parcels. So if Tzipori was part of the Chelik of Zvulun, then it would be Zavas Chalav Dvash in the Chelik of Zvulun. So why is Zvulun complaining? B'chitem, and if you'll say, yeah, Tzipori is in the Chelik of Zvulun. And therefore Zvulun has Zavas Chalav Udvash. But nevertheless, he's going to complain. Why? To lo nefisha didei kidachua. That whereas in other places the bracha of Zavas Chalav Dvash was fulfilled, and in his chelik there's a certain place where it's Zavas Chalav Dvash, but nevertheless lo yagadol kamo b'chelik shara ach. So the Gemara asks the following question: Ve'ha Omar Rabba Bar Chana Omar Rabbi Yochanan L'didi Chazili. I saw a place where this bracha of Zavas Chol Dvash came to fruition. The Chol Arad Yisrael, in all of the land of Israel. Vahavya Kimivnei Kubi. If you would integrate all these places together, you would find a shetach, an area, which is like Mimakom Shenikra Beit Kuvik, a place called Beit Kuvik. Ad Akra de Tulbakni, which is on the other side of the river in a place called Tulbakni. Esrim Vitartin Parsi Urcha. Esrim Ushtayim Parsos Orech. Upsuchim Shita Parsi. And it's got a width of 6 parsos, which is the equivalent of 132 parsos squared. So Zavas Cholos Vash of Tzipori, which is Arba Parsios, Al Arba Parsos, which is 16 parsos square, it had less than an eighth of all of Zavas Cholos Vash of all of Eretz Yisrael. It's more than the shear that's Roy Leos L'Shevet Echad. And all of Zavas Cholos Vash is divided equally. So again, we go back to our original question. If Tzipori was in the Chelik of Zvulun, he wouldn't be Mitzrayim al Chelko. How could Zeiri say that Kitron is Michelko Shel Zvulun, which is Tzipori? And the Gemara answers, yeah, you're right. Tzipori is in the Chelik of Zvulun. Afilu Hachi, even so, Zvulun has a complaint. He wants to lodge his complaint on his chelik. Why? Sodos ukramim adifale. If he only had access or possession of sodos ukramim, that would be so much better. Chavivin b'einav yosem mitzipori. That he would love even more than tzipori, and therefore he was complaining that there were no sodos ukramim in his chelik. That was the hisramus, the Misraim against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Daikonami, and we can be medaikas from the pasuk from which we darshan Shenitzrayim Zvulun al Chelko D'chsiv. The pasuk says in Shoftim v'Naftali al Meromei Sada, and we darshan that Zvulun was jealous of Naftali because he had Meromei Sada. Shmamino would see clearly that Taramuso Hoisal Sodos Ukramim Shalai B'Chelko. He was just complaining about those fields and those vineyards that weren't in his chelik. Rabbi Avo, the city of Akron, which was mentioned in Sfanya Novi, is Ekron Te'oker. It will be underrooted, meaning undermined. And Zu Kesre Bas Edom, which means it's a place where the Bnei Edom live. Shehio Sheves Bein Acholos, and it is surrounded on all sides with a mukefes bechol, bechol tzadeh. Lefishi benuya al shilt al sirton b'yav, v'chol shal sfas hayom akifa mikol tzadeh. V'hoisa yosed tkua li Yisrael b'mei Yevonim, that kshem she yosed tkua b'choze, kach yoshvei Kisri were not commanded to move. Milasos Ro Yisrael. Ukshegover Malchus Beis Chashmonoim in Ischum, Hayukorno so Achidas Migdal Shir. So let me just read to you a little bit of the English translation here. He says here, and he shall be like a chief in Judah, and Ekron shall be like Yebusi. Okay. Ekron Teoker, Ekron shall be uprooted. This is a reference to Caesarea, the daughter of Edom, which is situated between the sands, and was a constant source of harassment to Israel in the days of the Greeks. And when the Hasmonean dynasty prevailed and was victorious over the Greeks, They called her the captured tower of Shir. Omar Rab Yossi, Rab Chanina, my Dechsiv, what does it mean in the Pasuk in Zechariah? Vasirosi dama mipiv shikuta ben shinov benishar gamhula elokenu. I will remove his blood from his mouth and his detestable things from between his teeth, and he too shall remain for our God. And Rabbi Yossi is now going to explain this phrase by phrase. Vasirosi dama mipiv, I will remove his blood from his mouth. Ze base Bamaya Shalem. This refers to the house of Bamaya. Bamaya and Galia, which we'll get to later, were the main idols worshipped by the Edomites. And I will remove his blood. This is a reference to the house of Bamaya. That sort of the base avodah zarah, the shikuta bibein shinov, and his detestable things from between his teeth. Zeh base Galia Shalahem, the house of Galia also was a place of avodah zarah, a temple of theirs. The nishar gam hula elokenu, he too shall remain for God. Elu bate knesius ubate midrash shebe'edom, where the Jews would study and pray during the exile of Edom. V'hoya ka'aluf b'Yehuda the ikron kibusi, he shall be like a chief in Judah, and Ekron shall be like Yebusi, which is Yerushalayim. Elu tereatros, these are theaters, amphitheaters, bikir kosos, and circuses, Sheba Edom of Edom. Shasidim Sari Yehuda Lalamid Bem Torah Barabim. At the end of days, time of the redemption, the princes of Judah will be destined to teach Torah in public. Rabbi Yitzchak, Leshem Zu Pamios, Pamios, which is the source of the Jordan River. Anyway, Ekron Te Aker, Ekron should be uprooted. Zu Kesari, this is Kesaria. Base Edom, Bas Edom, the daughter of Edom. Shehi Oisa Metropolin Shel Malachim, which is a metropolis of kings. Ika Diamri de Merabe Ba Malche. Kings were raised there. The Ika Diamri de Mokme Bina Malche. Kings were appointed from there. Kesari Birushalayim Im Yom Alecha Adam Charvu Shteim. If somebody will say that both Kesari and Jerusalem were destroyed, then Al-Tamin, don't believe it. Yashvu Shteim Al-Tamin, somebody tells you they're both settled, don't believe it. Charva Kesari v'Yosh Yerushalayim, Charva Yerushalayim because v'Yosh Kesaria Tamin. You could believe it if one of these two was, so to speak, laid to waste. So in other words, when they're up, we're down, Chasrom. When we're up, they're down. Shenemar ilmole hakarava, and the pasuk here in Yechezkel, Yan Asher Omra Tsar al Yerushalayim ilmole hakarava, I shall be filled with her that is laid waste, and this teaches regard to Israel and Rome. In Malaya Zu Charvazu, Malaya Zu Charvazu. At all times, one is on the up and one is subjugated on the bottom. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Omer Mehacha, he could derive the same concept from a different pasuk in Bereshis L'om L'om Yamatz, and one king shall be stronger than the other kingdom. Another teaching of Rabbi Yitzchak regarding Edom, or Rabbi Yitzchak, my Dechsiv, what does it mean? Yuchan Rasha Bal Lomad Tzedek, let favor be shown to the wicked, yet he will not learn righteousness. Omer Yitzchak, Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, Yuchan Esav, let's favor Esav. Omalo Rashu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds, he's an evil person. Omalo Yitzchak responds, Bal Lomad Tzedek, he has not learned righteousness. In other words, there was nothing righteous about him. Question mark. Amalo, because Baruch responded, the Eretz Nechochos Ya'avel. In the land of uprightness, he will deal wrongfully. And this is a pasuk that continues the nevuah that he will destroy Yerushalayim. Amalo Imkain Ubal Yira Geus Hashem. Yitzchak says to everyone, Shalom, if so, he will not behold the majesty of Hashem. The Omer Rabbi Yitzchak Ma'idich Siv Al Titein Hashem Ma'avi Rosh Ma'aviyeh Rosh Azamu Al Tofek Yerumusela. What does the pasuk mean when it says that grant not Hashem the desires of the wicked one, do not remove his nose ring, that they shall be exalted Selah. Omer Yaakov's Ne'akadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, Al Titein Li Esav Harasha Tavas Libo. Do not grant Esav, the wicked Esav, the desires of his heart. Zmamo Al Tofek. Do not remove his nose ring. What is that referring to? Here we turn to Dav Vavam and Beis. Zu Germamia Shel Edom, which is a royal province in Edom. Shel Molei Hein Yotzim Echrimin Kol Olam Kulo. If they would go forth, they would destroy the entire world. So the next part of this Gemara, which we'll cover in Mishram tomorrow, is about Germamia. Okay, then? So we'll stop here on the top of Vav Amud Beis.